ready to start up the next panel. I want to call my panelists up to the stage here, and you can see their names up here. We've got Aaron Zellhart from Mattel. We have Joe Garvin from 3M. We have Rowena Fornica from Ford, Douglas Guilherme from Hershey, and Karan Arora from Kaiser Permanente. So come on up. Thank you. Oh, yeah.
How are you?
And these were all the great people that I mentioned in my kickoff that come from a diverse set of industries and actually a real diverse set of backgrounds as well and currently in their roles. So maybe we just take a minute, everybody just march on down the line here, do a quick introduction of yourself, your background, and what you do.
Sure. Glad to be here. My name's Aaron Zellhart. I am at Mattel, which is a family entertainment company, which is in its 80th year. So I make Barbie and Hot Wheels and monster trucks and all sorts of other toys that you probably have played with. I still have some of my original toys in my office. So they do make lifelong memories. And I'm really responsible for balancing supply and demand. So I have the supply chain planning and the strategy.
Excellent.
Hello, very excited to be here. My name is Joe Garvin. I work for 3M Company. Hopefully everybody knows 3M. If you don't, you would know us from Post-it notes and Scotch tapes and command strips. A lot of household brand items that you use every day. We also make a lot of exciting things that you probably don't know you use, like films that go in your mobile phone and things that go in your automobile. And at 3M, I work in our global logistics team. So I lead our Global Logistics and Transportation Excellence Group. Been there for a little over 15 years.
Good afternoon. My name is Rowena Fornica, and I lead the Supply Chain Excellence Organization at Ford Motor Company. Ford Motor Company is a 122-year-old automotive company, home of the F-150 truck, best-selling truck in the U.S. for the last 50 years, and many other iconic brands and vehicles. I'm glad to be here.
Hi, good afternoon. Douglas, I am the Global Vice President for Supply Chain for our two business, confection and salty snacks. I hope that you have a lot of our products for Halloween that is coming. I'm glad to be here.
Hi, everybody. My name is Karan Arora. Good afternoon. I work for Kaiser Permanente. Kaiser Permanente is an integrated healthcare system, one of the largest in the country. We're based out of California, Oakland, and I just flew in from there. And I lead indirect sourcing for KP, and I've been with them for 3 years. And yeah, good to see you.
All right, well, let's jump right into the questions here, and we'll start right at the title. How do you build in resilience without sacrificing cost or service? And I think all of us can go back to maybe the first ops research class we've taken, how to figure out safety stock. Do you want to have inventory? Do you want to have supply? But that helped when companies were just looking at basic, we're going to optimize on cost or growth or maybe a mix. Didn't really take resilience into account. So let's start with Rowena here. How does Ford think about that trade-off? How do you think about resilience relative to the other factors in play?
Yeah, I'm going to speak obviously from a Ford perspective, but I think this applies to automotive as a whole. There has been a significant shift towards adding resilience as another strategic pillar, in addition to cost, quality, and delivery for growth, which have been the traditional measures in the supply chain for these companies. And that comes as a result of the increasing frequency of disruptions and then the increased cost of these disruptions over the last 10 to 15 years. From a Ford perspective, the way that we balance resilience and cost is primarily looking at cost as a total value, right? So how does that translate? A couple of examples. When it comes to sourcing, we have gone beyond sourcing based on the best landed cost or even based on the total, NPV to look at the measures of risk. So we measure and we track multiple dimensions of risks in the supply chain, whether you're talking about the financial health of suppliers, geopolitical risk of compliance, cybersecurity, and then we get those insights as part of our sourcing process. And at times that may mean that we may not source necessarily at the lowest cost, but we may end up sourcing with the right number of tools or multiple sourcing footprints or multiple dual tools as needed to ensure that over the life of the program and based on the performance behavior of that supplier and that site, we get a stable or as robust a supply as we can. Another example of how we do this at FOR right now is driving common incentives across the organization. What do I mean by that? In the past, you could get very easily at the plan level, decisions to just get rid of inventory, right, to meet short-term goals, and of course that drove gaps when it comes to disruptions and even more costly consequences of that, such as premium freight and lost sales and lost productions or downtime. Obviously, what we have been encouraging in the plant is we are going to measure that safety stock in a different way and hold it centrally so that there is not an incentive for those plants, and those different stakeholders to get rid of it to optimize short-term objectives.
So it sounds like Ford is looking much beyond just simple cost cutting and metrics. So Douglas, let's talk a little bit about Hershey. How are you measuring resilience? How do you all think about it?
Look, I think that for generally supply chain was going into labor arbitrage, offshoring, just in time, no? And then COVID hit and we moved to the other extreme of the pendulum, just in case, a lot of resilience. So I think that the point is not should be cost or resilience. It's just like asking, do you like your dad or mom? Which sibling you like the most, no? It's at this fine balance that you have to generate savings in the short term, but also bring your business savviness to make decisions on what is the right level of investment to protect the future. No? So for me, it is strike this balance and protect profitable growth. And supply chain needs to be all about how to protect the future of the company or having profitable growth.
Got it. Well, let's dig into that a little bit more. If we think about resilience, oftentimes it's about intentionally raising your costs, not always going with the cheapest option. So, how, and this is a question for you, Aaron, how do you communicate and justify raising costs to gain resiliency upline to your leadership?
Yeah, I think it's two things. One, it's about being proactive versus being reactive. And then it's about knowing your model. So being proactive, understanding what your risks are, right? We're always caught up in the cause or the action that causes a disruption instead of really just preparing for disruption in general, right? So it doesn't matter if it's a boat that goes sideways in the Suez Canal or a natural disaster or a tariff. We just have to be ready for disruption. And so in our planning process, we have a 1 year, a 3 year, and a 10-year planning process where we try to identify the risks, understand what they are. And then as you go through your short and long-term financial planning, understanding what those costs are, and then putting them into your P&L when you can afford them. So it's really about being proactive and understanding when you want to do those costs. And the other thing is about understanding your model, right? So you have to really understand your supply chain from end to end, and you have to understand that it's unique, right? Everybody likes to think that they're special in some way, and I guess we all are in some way. But there are unique things about each supply chain, even within the same industry, that if you don't understand, then you're going to make a mistake. So you really have to understand what your model is, what your risks are, and what you can afford, and how do you put that into your long-term planning process over time.
Got it. I really like the part about understanding the model and the differences of your business. So, Karen, I want to ask a question for you. You're in a little bit different business than folks here. Everyone on this list is making physical goods. You're dealing in the healthcare space. So, maybe in a lot of ways, what you do is the most important of everybody here. It's people's health, people's lives. Tell me a little bit about how you think of things at Kaiser. How do you think about resilience there?
So 3 years back when I was at Procter & Gamble, I would have given a very similar answer to Douglas. But as I moved to healthcare, resiliency or continuity is at the heart of things. So in a way, that makes my life a little bit easier because I don't have to justify that we have to create a way or supply chain or sourcing strategies which can deliver affordable but also high quality, high service care. Those deliverables are on everybody's scorecard or work plans. So in healthcare, the quality of delivery and taking care of every patient is at the heart of all our decisions. And then, yes, we have the challenge to then achieve it at a much more reasonable price. Yes, we had the COVID shocks. Yes, we had the impacts of tariffs and everything. But we will not compromise ever on how the care is delivered. So that is a fundamental shift. Even though you might reason that in other industries also you will keep this consumer at the center of the everything, but here you're talking about impacting a life. So that makes it even more challenging, but also starkly clear that we cannot compromise on that goal.
Yes. Great. Now, Joe, you're a little bit more from the logistics side of the business versus planning or some of the other things we've been talking about. How do you at 3M think about resilience and cost as it applies to the logistics processes?
Yeah, so similar to what some of the other panelists have said, is it's really, it's an and, right? We're gonna focus on safety and cost out and resiliency, service and cash and. If I go to see my boss in January and I say, what do you think I should work on this year? Resiliency and service or cost? She's gonna say, yes, both. And I think as supply chain leaders, that's the value we're bringing, is we're able to focus on both. Now that said, at a micro level, we'll have a trade lane or a profit center or commodity where we will very intentionally say we're going to spend more in order to bring resiliency, right? It's a critical enough item for our customers, and it's important enough to our portfolios that we'll say we can go higher cost here. We're going to take a hit, but here's all the reasons why that we can support it. And then really what we have to do is come back to the bigger picture, the bigger 3M, and say, okay, now how do I drive that cost somewhere else? How do I find another lever that I can pull, since I know I've got some areas where I'm going to be spending a little bit more?
Got it. Well, we've talked a lot about resiliency and cost. Now, one of the things that often comes with these approaches towards resiliency is whether you're using secondary sources or whether you're going to partially insource or you're going to start to nearshore. That also can create more complexity. So if we're thinking about complexity, how does that come into the equation? Not just cost. So Douglas, how do you think about that at Hershey?
Yes, I'd start with, if you think about Amazon, they have 600 million SKUs. Walmart have 420 million SKUs. eBay, 2.3 billion SKUs. And you never see them complaining about complexity. Right? You have to understand what is the role that each SKU has to play for your customer and consumer. So you start with this in mind. At Hershey, we have a program called Smart Complexity, and it operates under 3 pillars. One is more from the core. So from the capacity and capability that we have internally, how can we use more of it, instead of trying to create the new shiny object? The second one is how to adjust the equation. Is this SKU performing the way that it's supposed to? Are you launching a new SKU to drive net sales, but the other SKUs are not in their pre-trade VCM or the margin that they're supposed to? And the third pillar is how to protect with governance and guardrails on new SKUs that we're launching to make sure that they are accretive to the core. Once you have these 3 and you answer yes, then you design back your supply chain to cope with complexity. So it's not about complaining about complexity. It's how to design, understand that it's value for consumers and customers, and design your supply chain on planning, logistics, manufacturing, procurement to cope with the complexity that is needed.
Got it. Now, if I think about the panelists here, the people with the most complex products are over at Ford. So, Rowena, how do you handle the complexity aspect of resiliency at Ford?
So We start by looking at whether we can reduce complexity in components that, for example, designing vehicles with fewer parts or easier to assemble parts, or even, as an example, sharing components across vehicles that are not differentiating to the customer, right? In that way, you reduce the complexity in terms of parts that you have to manage, in terms of just the design and the release and just maintaining those parts. But then we do add complexity back when it comes to protecting some of these critical components, right? For example, through dual tooling or multi-sourcing. So the smart balance of the two is really where we play at. And then another way where we do this is through discipline, cycle planning, and portfolio planning, and the decisions that we do to manage the capital through the life cycle of our vehicles. So we are very intentional about what vehicles, what configurations, what customer segments we must protect, and therefore what parts, what commodities need to have either targeted stockpiling or additional tools or different risk mitigation strategies, right? So those would be the two areas that I would say at fore right now, help us balance the complexity and at the same time achieve resilience.
Great.
If I could just add.
Yeah,
to that.
absolutely.
Yeah, I think it is, knowing your model, right? So we have discrete manufacturing, just like Ford. I think we made 1 billion vehicles last year, right? So it's all about how your supply chain comes together. So you guys have a lot more parts than my vehicles do, but we have a lot more vehicles. So the kitting of parts and understanding part flow for us is incredibly hard because of the factories are putting out tens of millions of complete finished goods every week. And so really it is to understand your model and to reduce the complexity. And it's really to understand, okay, what matters to me and where can I simplify and where can I allow for a little more complexity?
Got it. Got it. Taking the lens back a little bit here, resilience is really to deal with disruptions. And disruptions have been around since as long as any of us have been doing supply chain. Historically, there would be disruptions, whether it was hurricanes or global conflicts or things like that. And companies would get focused on resiliency, and then time would go on and they'd go back just a few years later and they're chasing cost again. I'd say in the last 5 years, it has been one disruption after another, rather than these spikes that we've had in the past. Do you think at this point in time that companies have taken resiliency and built it into their DNA? Or do you see them, kind of slipping back into the old ways, and in another couple of years, we'll be chasing costs again? So, Joe, maybe we'll start with you on that.
Sure. Yeah, I think of course it depends on the company. I could speak for the logistics industry. I think I can speak for the logistics industry and say at the macro level, we have not, as an industry, been able to make resiliency part of our DNA. I think it becomes pretty obvious when you see a minor disruption like a port strike on the East Coast becomes something that drags for months and months and impacts costs and service levels across all of our carrier partners around the world. So, I think it is really incumbent on the companies like 3M to say, okay, the industry isn't going to do this for me, but I also know that customers aren't patient like they used to be. I think 10 or 15 years ago, you could say to a customer, hey, this happened, I'm really sorry, we're going to be late, we're going to miss your order, and maybe you could get away with it. I think now customers don't have the same patience level, and their expectation is that you're coming up with proactive ways to manage the disruption, that you're out ahead of whatever is going to happen to the industry that could create the chaos. So in our case, we're building route closure playbooks and bringing on new ports and new partners, and we're leveraging service and reliability metrics as part of our award strategy, so that even if the industry isn't quite there, it isn't quite focusing on resiliency the way we think they should or could, we can still beat the competition, still meet the customer's expectations if something does go wrong.
Perfect. So, and I do like the idea of creating these alternate routes, plans, what if scenarios. Now, Karan, how does that work in your industry? Because I realize it's different here. First off, do you think your industry has kind of learned its lesson, for lack of a better word, on institutionalizing resiliency? And then what are some of the things you've done about it?
Yeah, I was listening to the discussion. So I remember years and years back when I started my career, like my boss would say, let's plan for the volatile world. Our volatility has increased maybe a tad bit. Looking at that from a healthcare standpoint, given our reliability of care is utmost important, we do work in two ways, which I think some of the panelists have spoken about. So you'll be in a scenario where you're with one major supplier. So I'm thinking about from an indirect spend standpoint, you might have goods, but a lot of my spend is services. But there is a patient at the end of every service. So if I'm dependent on one supplier for a good reason, I'll work with them to have a business continuity plan, and whether it's contractual, whether it's operational, day to day, we'll establish that and we come through with it. In as many cases as possible, we would institutionalize, to your point, the resiliency by having multi-sourcing approach, which I think we all pioneered through our COVID experiences, and that learning keeps going. And then we make sure we try to institutionalize, whether it's a IT service, whether it's a facility service, whether it's our insurance side of business, because we are an integrated system. We try to build resiliency through structural interventions like these.
Great. And I see from the time here, we have a good amount of time left for our last question. And I think any conference like this, you would be remiss if you didn't bring up AI. So questions, and we'll just kind of march on down the line here on AI. Where do you see the biggest opportunities for AI? Where are you using it in your organization? And then what risks do you see in terms of rolling AI out? Not only in its success, but also becoming too dependent on it.
Sure. So we announced a partnership with OpenAI last month, I think. Maybe it was 6 weeks ago. And everybody got super excited about it from the product side, right? So maybe we're not the coolest part of the company, right? And I don't know if we're ever going to be the coolest part of the company. But we were the first in line to say that we wanted to start to experiment with it and understand it because of the planning process that we have and because of the information that we have. The biggest opportunity from a planning standpoint is to understand and be able to model and be able to iterate really, really quickly and to identify risks. So we've really jumped into it. We're using it in all of our planning processes, short and long term. But the company's externally really focused on what does that mean from a product standpoint. Right. But I think there's applications, across the entire organization.
If you were to think about AI in your organization, are you just scratching the surface? Do you think you've mostly realized the benefits, or long way to go? Where do you think you're at in the journey?
Yeah, I think it depends on if you're talking about forecasting and machine learning, we were using that before, right? So if you're talking about kind of generative AI and other things, that's probably where we're scratching the surface. I know from a product standpoint, they're just starting to unlock those possibilities of what that means. But for us, we're into it. We're getting benefits from it, but I think there's a long way to go.
Okay, great. Let's go over to Joe. So maybe not only for 3M, but since you're the logistics representative here, where do you see AI playing a role in both your company and the broader logistics segment?
Yeah, so of course, AI is taking massive bites into the logistics industry, just like it is everywhere else. And I think at 3M, we've deployed pretty early some really nice programs where we're using machine learning, we're using AI, we're doing things like getting predictive ETAs because you can't trust a carrier ETA. So we're getting smart ETAs and leading it back into our ERP system so that we can update real dates to our customers. We're getting automated agents that are going out and doing tracking and tracing for us, and they're getting PODs and helping clean up some of the data that in logistics in general tends to struggle with. So we've deployed some really nice programs. I'd say as an industry, we're probably a little bit behind maybe what you'd see in manufacturing, where it's a little bit more contained in what you can do in AI. But we've been really happy with the programs we've deployed. I will say just, to the original question asking about, hey, what are some of the risks out there? I do think some of the success that we've had with AI has been around finding a use case and bringing in a very specific AI solution to meet that use case. I think, at least when I first started learning about AI a few years ago, I kind of thought, oh, there'll be this single AI and it'll just solve all of our problems. And if we're going to wait for AI to solve all of our problems with one fell swoop, it's going to be a long wait. So I think it's find a limited use case, get the right partner, go attack that use case, and we've had good success with that.
Let me ask you a follow-up on that. A lot of times, as a technology vendor, we often talk to companies and say technology is going to help your workers become more efficient to do more value-added tasks. But then going back to that articles in the newspaper, they never comment to say everything's going great. What you read on the newspaper is AI is going to put people out of work. Where do you see that dichotomy falling?
Yeah, I think that we've used AI to enable more productive people. So in our organization, we're not, we haven't been looking at it as a way to eliminate. It's more, how do we enable people to make better decisions? How do we enable people to focus on important tasks? So I'm not spending 30 minutes of my day going to a website and looking up where is this shipment. The AI takes care of that for me, and it gives me that time to focus on something strategic or something that's going to drive more value ultimately for the company.
That's good to hear. Alina, how about it, Ford? What do you see the big opportunities for you? Do you see any risks?
Yes. So from a for supply chain perspective, we have been primarily using AI already with all the analytics that I described around risk management, and in particular trying to correlate and predict what that next event will be. Obviously, the goal is to get to the single point of failure, to be able to map that in a very complex supply chain. And that's kind of like what we are working towards. But it also, we have started to use it in the procurement side of the house, in the purchasing side of the house, more around data gathering. There was I read a statistics, I think it was Lean DNA or one of these organizations who published that 35% of buyers' time gets spent just gathering data.
Right.
And our ability we've demonstrated, and we are developing a tool that allows us, to just have all of that information at the fingertips of the buyer. So obviously the speed in which the buyer now is able to really work in creating a negotiation strategy, right, increases versus just spending a third of their time chasing all these disparate sources of information. So that would be another great use in general for supply chain. And then, of course, there are multiple opportunities to connect with suppliers and actually bring data directly from their manufacturing sites so that we can also detect anomalies and understand and try to prevent quality disruptions before they take place. So I would say those are the three primary use cases that we have in supply chain right now.
And just to follow up on that, if you think about Ford, more than 120 years old, as traditional quintessential American company as you could think of, how are the employees looking at AI? Are they excited about it? Are they nervous about it? Do they think they're going to get they need to upskill, they're going to get replaced by younger workers? What's the general tone among the workforce?
Yeah, Ford has been on a transformation journey here for a good 5 years now, and there is a lot of energy around, transformation in general. I would say that AI has been, and machine learning before that, has been, well received. There is a lot of excitement about it. You not only we have, within the enterprise technology organization, areas that are specifically helping us design those tools. But then you can start to see how different groups, people are just self-learners. They are also bringing their own innovations, and there is a lot of energy around it. I do think that it is actually, it's noticeable how much people are benefiting from it.
That's right. How about at Hershey?
Look, we had a roundtable just before here, and I was explaining that humans are generating 100 zettabyte of data every year. It's equivalent of 35 billion high definition movies of data per year. It's impossible to ingest and make sound decisions with this data. So AI can be an ally and augment decisions where needed. With our organization, we are very clear that one of the key problems is related to change management. And the message is AI will not replace you. Someone using AI might replace you. So we want you to embrace and learn and upskill. We're using AI very fast and furious across supply chain. And it's on sourcing strategy, on contract management, or for connected work on manufacturing, or for planning. So it's across, even for ergonomics. So real-time information for employees on if they are doing the right, they will have retrofit, green, yellow, red, adjust your position. So the whole point here is how do we get AI to automate and eliminate the mundane tasks that take 80% of your time, but elevate and put attention for the 20% that you have to pay attention. So it's just like an exo-brain partner that's helping you to make the right decisions.
Got it. So follow up for you. You mentioned that you're using AI in many different places across supply chain. At Hershey, is supply chain considered an early adopter AI relative to some of the other functions inside the company, kind of in the middle, a laggard? Where do you all stand?
That's a good question. I think we were catching up in many things. If you think about advanced planning, some companies were implementing 5 years, 3 years before us, some peers. On decision intelligence, I can tell you that we are moving really fast, and very likely we at the same level or getting ahead most of our peers. Now, I think the acceleration of adoption of AI at Hershey has been tremendous. So we start slower. I think now we are getting faster and way ahead of many.
Great, thank you. Karan, let's finish up with you. Similar question. Tell us about AI at Kaiser, AI in the healthcare industry. How do you see the benefits coming, and do you see any risks?
So healthcare in general I see the possibilities are everywhere, whether it's care delivery or otherwise, or supply chain or operational. And we are in process of exploring those applications. But yeah, it is with a more cautious approach as we are a service and care organization. So I think our pace might be maybe behind or not, I'm not sure, but it's more of a cautious approach and a measured approach in healthcare. Yeah.
Got it. And a little follow-up for you, much more of a people-centric business, not only with your customers, but also the caregivers at the hospitals. Do you think that doctors have a reputation of not being super enamored with technology? How do you think their adoption might be of AI? Embracing, resisting? Are they coming into play with AI at your organization?
So that can be said for any new shiny toy kind of thing. But I think there are people in both camps in general everywhere. And depending on where the applications are, you might see a different level of adoption. But in general, there is a general excitement about this, as we all know. But yeah, we need to see how it translates into a betterment for healthcare industry.
Great. And with that, for any of the panelists, any final thoughts, lessons learned, anything you want to share? Otherwise, we can open it up for any potential questions from the audience.
I can tell you that the change management has been a tricky part for us. Now, we made a decision on our business case to implement AI do not include any productivity. And it was in order to get people to embrace and adapt. And our commitment is we will have productivity. And the productivity will come from people that are retiring, people that are leaving the company, or just not hiring back. No? So with that, we are lowering the anxiety and getting people more excited about how to implement. I think it was not my idea. Someone from my team had this idea. I think it was brilliant.
Great. Anybody else? Last thoughts? All right. Well, if there's questions from the audience, sure, shoot. We got a microphone coming up.
So, really direct question. So, how you are dealing reducing the cost of the supply chain while we have the pressure to bring back the manufacturing in the US?
So is the question specifically how are you doing with cost with reshoring of manufacturing? I want to make sure.
Yes, it seems like quite opposite to reducing the cost in supply chain while we have also the pressure to bring back all the manufacturing here inside the US.
Look, I mentioned this, sorry. I mentioned this in the beginning, so we have to go away from this extreme pendulum on just in time, just in case. I think it's still a balance between how do you friendshoring, nearshoring, and protect resilience, but also taking care of cost. So we have different sourcing. In our case, is still in different countries. Most of our manufacturing is in US, but it's a fine balance between bringing everything here and have resilience, but also having some optionality in Canada, in Mexico, in different countries. So it's every time that you're trying to go for an extreme, again, you are just reacting to external forces. You have to think about the long term. And the decisions on long term might be different from what you're doing now for protecting manufacturing.
Excellent. Well, thank you for the question. Unfortunately, that's the last question we have time for here. The countdown clock is down to 10 seconds, but our panelists are going to be available here for you to grab them in the hallways. We've got about 5 minutes before we turn over to the next session. So I want to thank the audience. I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us today and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you.